Okay, so now it's time to fix this issue. So first thing I want to do before we get started, let's just clean up this test a little bit. Let's remove this comment because it's no longer valid. And we need to check the output from this view. And so we had a little error there, which didn't get caught because when we ran the test, this threw an exception. So we never actually got to this point where that variable was missing. But now our test looks good and we're ready to go figure this out. So if you remember in the last video, what we did to try to figure out where this problem is we looked up that component not found exception. So let's go ahead and do that again. I'm just gonna go to the top and I'm gonna look for this component not found exception, and this Livewire Manager uh, PHP class is where this is happening. So let's take a look and try to figure out what this does. Now, understand your goal is not to fully understand every line of code in this code base. If you can, great. But really, just try to get a high level understanding of what's going on here and how you might be able to fix it. So we have this get component class, and it passes in the alias. Not quite sure what the alias is, but one thing I really like to do to help me understand what's going on is to die and dump certain variables. So just to get started, let's die and dump this alias. And so let's go back to our UI and refresh this page. And the alias is the counter. So my assumption is if we go back to the view where this is, so I'm going to be switching back and forth from my Fresh Laravel project and the Livewire code base. So let's go back to Fresh Laravel. And so this is the view here. The alias, it seems to be this counter right here. If I change it to 123 and reload, sure enough, that is the alias. So now we have kind of a better idea of what's going on in the Livewire code base. So we're passing the alias into the component class. Let's get rid of our die and dump. We are resolving something out of the container. The class is being initialized to false. If this custom component resolver, not quite sure what that is, but if this is true, we're going to set the class to something else. So I'm not really sure what's going on here, but let's just die and dump our class and see what's happening here. Let's go back to our code base. So it's still false. So we have not gotten a class yet. And then let's throw one, let's move it right here. So here's another thing. The class should be assigned to whatever the class was, or this component. So we're using the alias we had and we're going to try to find it. So again, I don't know exactly what's going on here, but let's refresh. And so here, this looks familiar. This has gone out, and so this code, again, I don't know exactly what it does, but what I can tell, what it did was it went out and got the namespace of the class, but it went and got it from the old manifest, because we know if we go back to our Fresh Laravel, again, let's review. This is the old manifest that has Livewire counter here, but we want it to live in the components folder. So let's go back here and take a look. So this piece of code is where it is assigning the class namespace. So, and it's getting the wrong one. So one way we could fix this would be to somehow somehow regenerate the manifest before it gets here. Because then you can see throw unless. So if this is false, we're going to throw this exception. But we just saw it's not false. So we might need to keep looking to see where the actual exception is thrown. We know that the class we have is wrong, but we haven't gotten to where the exception is actually thrown yet. So let's remove that and let's take a look. This get component class is actually called from this activate method. Sorry, get component method, called from the activate method. And so here we go. Let's do a die and dump of the component class. Again, this is just my approach to how I kind of solve this. And so we can see here, we've got the same thing, which we would expect. That's what we saw would be returned. And so now this is where we're getting a problem. We're checking if this class exists. So let's do that. Exists. And this is probably what's false, which is generating the exception. Yep, so this is false. So what we could do to fix this, what if we check if this is false? So here we go. If class exists, component class, and we want this, if this is false, let's regenerate the manifest. So we know that we can do that. We have this discover command, which we could run. If we look at the command, all we really need to do is resolve the components finder out of the container and run this build method. That's the only thing. So to me, it doesn't really make sense to run a command. Let's just take this line of code and go back to the Livewire manager. And here we go. So if the component class doesn't exist, let's just rebuild our manifest. And then we need to try to get the component class again. So let's do that. All right, we're gonna remove our die and dump, and let me just go through one more time what we're really doing here. We're checking, do we have a component class that exists? If the answer is no, then we're going to try to rebuild the manifest, which is what we're doing here. And then let's just go get the component class one more time. Then we'll take whatever we have here, whether it exists or not, and come here. So if it doesn't exist, we're still going to get our exception. But if it does, because of the instance we're in right now, where the manifest just hasn't been updated properly, then we should get through and everything should be great. And if this works, the other thing that we'll be able to see over here is that our Livewire components, this is our manifest, this should be updated after we load this page. So let's do a quick refresh. And sure enough, everything's gone, no exception. So if we go back to our code base, you can see that was Livewire, now it's components. And so this is exactly what we wanted to do. This makes sure we have the manifest generated and no longer get this exception here. So it looks like on the UI we're fixed. What about our unit tests? So let's give that a shot. Let's run the full suite, and we are still getting an error. Now, if we go back to our code, or if we look at the error we're getting, they're still unable to find the component, and it looks like line 62 of the Livewire manager. So if we go to line 62, which is right here, this is the place where the class is not able to be resolved. So again, I don't really know what all this code does, but what if we take the same approach and apply it here? So if the class is null, let's try one more time. But before we try, we want to, again, get this components finder and run the build method. Now, if we look at this code a little more closely, we can see we already have this components finder resolved out of the container. So we don't need to go get it again. Let's just use this and call build. And sure enough, if we run our test suite one more time, there we go. Everything passes. So as far as I can tell, I think we have a nice solution to our problem. And so in the next video, what I'm going to do is talk about how I want to package up my solution as far as, getting my pull request ready so that when the maintainer of this project reviews what I've done, they understand what's happening.